Thank you so much. This has been really an amazing gathering, and I appreciate it actually being open and accessible and free. I wish there was more gatherings like this, and to honour the memory of the Simpson case in this way is quite extraordinary. I've been very involved in the marriage equality movement and the experience as a gay Irish immigrant who's also Catholic. And as we gather, of course, in Ireland today, there's a gathering of the Constitutional Convention reflecting on the critical and redefinition and evolving nature of marriage and family. In Washington, there's major debates about immigrants and comprehensive immigration reform and the plight of immigrants who are lesbian or gay. And what I'm fascinated with is the nature and the role, sort of the language about religion, belief, and law. And I'm amazed at, for instance, when I learned, for instance, how much God was invoked in the Loving versus Virginia case, which was the issue of where it was against the law for persons of mixed race to marry in this country, but how religion and God was invoked for that in the court. And I suppose in my own experience over the years, how much God and religious belief is invoked to prohibit, the movement for equality and equal rights for people. The irony is, I'll just throw in, because people often ask me, well, how the heck did you get involved in this movement for equality for lesbian and gay people? And I often tell them, well, actually, it's from priests and nuns and committed lay people in Ireland who were passionate about human rights. And so that was just as much an important. I'll just throw in, I actually helped couples cross the border to Canada, including actually Edie Windsor and her partner, Edie Thea Spire. That was in 2007. But I'm curious, is there hope? Is there a way as human beings that religion, law, that we can move forward together? Or will it always be an incredibly contentious? What are your thoughts? Is it possible to have a dialogue as religious folks, as lawyers?
Are you referring to the Irish case in the High Court?
Yes, anyone.
Well, there was a recent Irish case where a lesbian couple tried to get their union or their relationship acknowledged as a marriage in the Irish Constitution, and the High Court held that the 1937 Constitution must be interpreted in modern times, not historically, but the judge held that even in modern times, the Irish people, in her view, had not moved to the stage where she could think that the Irish people were recognizing a union between same-sex couples as a marriage, whatever that means. I'm only just saying that that was what she held. It seemed to be a very personalized decision by her on that issue. But the only thing I would say in relation to these matters is the law moves quite slowly. Constitutions move slowly. You will not get overnight recognition of any minority group's position in the courts, in my view, on a constitutional issue. It takes time, it takes campaigns, it takes several visits to the court until eventually the opinions change. But that's what the Irish courts have done so far. And it's a recent case.
Well, actually, I just read that actually there was a poll this week that over 74% of the Irish people that the referendum was held would actually support.
I know there's this convention going on, yes, right. yeah. But it may be.
So the non-legal reply, you said, was there hope? And I think that if you take that liberal democracy is the form of the nation state that has gone for the last 200 years with the development of broadly, for want of a better term, capitalist economic and social systems, some hope lies on the democracy side. Exploitations and the production of difference between people lies on the side of the social and economic system. We don't have equality as such. We do have laws that try to enforce it case by case, just as the whole significance of the need for laws around religious freedom has been amply demonstrated this weekend. However, it only takes us so far, and often the need isn't for more law. You know, for example, in Britain, under 4 decades of continual terrorist attacks, quite a sizable group of lawyers argue all the prevention of terrorism legislation was absolutely counterproductive, and all the powers necessary for the police to track down those people already existed. So you pass those laws, they engender fear, they produce a different situation, and they're passed for political reasons. On the hopeful side, because I think inequalities and exploitations are inevitably part of the Western societies we live in, you could say that, I would say, conflict is inevitable. Absence of conflict isn't the desired goal, because conflict shows that democracy is working at some level. Conflict shows that there is contestation. And many of the things that we're worried about have to be solved more in the political and cultural spheres than by more law. We need the basics of the law, but we don't necessarily need our politicians to constantly, as they do under, and let me use a hackneyed term, under neoliberalism, they constantly turn to ratcheting up the legislative base as saying that's them doing something. But actually, it may need more political leadership and more open contestation and discussion about those conflicts within our culture and our politics. So I see it's positive, hopeful that those conflicts are there. That's democracy working. But we live in a system that produces inequalities between people. And, you know, many of us are bothered about that.
I just want to say an addendum to what I've just said. For fear I've given the wrong impression, or that case should give the wrong impression, Ireland has become very secularized in the last 15 years. The church has lost much of its authority. The young people don't go to Mass, they don't go to traditional confession. I'm not saying they don't subscribe in some way, they get their children baptized, but a lot of it is lip service. I also am presiding officer for new citizens in the country. And in the last year and a half, I have presided over giving citizenship to 20,000 foreigners in Ireland. So we're becoming not only secular, but multicultural, much more multicultural. So I don't want people to get the idea that Ireland is intolerant. Ireland is more secular and more, even if you look at Cook and Carroll, it's not based on religious freedom. So, and some people get the idea that Ireland is an intolerant society. I don't believe so. I think it's a very tolerant society as we now have it.
If I may have one last question.
I'm sorry, it's less of a question and more of a comment to the gentleman's point over here. And it's that I think with the gay rights movement and the marriage equality movement, the liberal democracy is no longer waiting for the law. They're not waiting for the Supreme Court justices. Liberal democracy is speeding past the law in its vote in each of these individual states that are recognizing marriage equality. New York, Washington, Connecticut, Maryland, they're just flying by anything that the Supreme Court could do. And it was very interesting to note that Chief Justice John Roberts looked at the lawyer for the Edie Windsor and kind of was tweaking the lawyer a little bit, saying, can you really say that gays and lesbians are still a group that needs minority protection? Don't you have a bit of political clout? And she said, well, of course, we need minority protection. And the Chief Justice looked at her and said, yes, but every politician in America seems to be falling all over themselves to endorse your point of view. Now, I don't endorse by any means what the Chief Justice said there. I do endorse marriage equality, and I do think that the gay and lesbian community will be better off largely, since in America this is a state-by-state question. Who determines who can get married? It's a state-by-state question. Each state may determine this. The federal government does not. It's one of the reasons why the Defense of Marriage Act was a complete sham and unconstitutional from the get-go, because it's a state-by-state question. But I think that for the most part, you are going to see that liberal democracy is speeding past this and will outstrip what the courts can do, because the courts are by design slower and do take more time. So I would take some solace from that in the states that are moving forward to recognize marriage equality. Will all the states eventually do it? That I don't know. And at some point, the law will have to step in. If half the states do it and half the states do not, the federal government may have to step in to level the playing field.
Can I make a quick comment on that? Which is that, there's actually a case which addresses this head on, and it cites the Phillips case. The Phillips case has been cited over a dozen times, despite what Justice Scalia said. And in, I think, all but one case, which is an antebellum case, it's received, a warm approval in different contexts. And one of those is a case called Gay Rights Coalition of Georgetown University versus Georgetown University. The case is cited there. And of course, it's interesting because Father Coleman, after leaving New York, went back down to Washington, where, as you heard, he became president of Georgetown University. That case involved the first statute in this country to outlaw sexual orientation discrimination. It was passed in 1977. It preceded the Wisconsin statute by a number of years, and it outlaws any discrimination based on sexual orientation. And in resolving that case, the court allowed Georgetown, based on the Phillips argument in part, to not give official recognition to the student groups there, to the extent that that included a statement of approval of their ideals in some ways. So the endorsement was not required by the court. But the court did say that there was a compelling interest, the very standard we talked about, in the eradication of sexual orientation discrimination, which rose to the level of race or gender as strict scrutiny. These are categories which, if government uses them to distinguish between citizens, a racial classification, as in Loving versus Virginia, is subjected to strict scrutiny. And the court said 25 years ago, and I was actually at another conference like this one, celebrating the 25th anniversary of that decision. It was held last month at Georgetown University, and it made that equation for equal protection, 14th Amendment purposes. It said that sexual orientation should be treated the same as race. So if the Supreme Court embraced that, it would actually strike down gay marriage, laws preventing gay marriage, on that very reason, because they distinguish in that way. So I think it is certainly possible for people to see that there's not really the difference between the Catholic community and the gay community in that case, because in fact they may have a common interest. And that's pretty much how the case was received, although it was initially very controversial and it led to statutes in Congress that were attempts to overthrow it. But today, 25 years later, it looks obvious to a lot of people.
I might, just in ending, just reflect a little bit about where we started yesterday, which was on the theft of some jewels, which brought up a legal case. And I think one of the things that we should come away from, not only with the erudition that we have heard this afternoon and this morning, and the complexity of syntax that we heard yesterday, is the fact that it's up to citizens, and in this case it was a couple of trustees, and they could be trustees of any religion in any place, in any corner, or any faith. It's up to those citizens, and America provides this opportunity to take action. And it was those trustees at St. Peter's who decided not to allow the Attorney General to withdraw the case and not have it be an issue. So I think, when we talk about hope, it's up to us. I felt in my heart for the Imam today when he described, and with the sadness that it was somebody standing right beside him who spoke forward. We all need to speak up and do things. That's what the trustees did. That's what we should do. But before we do that, first of all, let me thank Marion Casey on behalf of the staff and Walter. Let me thank the panelists, only 8 of whom have survived here so far. And let me thank the audience for coming. And why don't you all join us, everyone in the audience, back at Ireland House, which is just across the block, for a drink before going on for the evening activities. Please do join us, and thank you very much to everyone.
And also to Cormac and to George, who have done a wonderful job as the organizers.